curveballs that are thrown in a very non-traditional environment and deliver projects. But maybe if I could just start, because as Mary mentioned, I understand a number of you from outside of Christchurch. Firstly, just give you a little bit of background and description of what Restart is. Cashel Mall was the centre point of retail in central Christchurch. It was one of the most badly damaged areas in the 22nd February earthquake. Very soon after the earthquake, a number of prominent Christchurch property owners realised that they wanted to maintain a level of engagement with the CBD and the public of Christchurch, and also importantly wanted to maintain a retail operation. And in the space of a short period of time, had to turn a complete disaster zone into what is Restart. And Restart is a collection of retail tenancies built in shipping containers. It also, as Mary mentioned, involves Ballantyne's building and some additional buildings on Ballantyne's, plus a sizable sub-anchor building in which Kathmandu are located. And just to finish the context, when you say it's a lot of shops built in shipping containers, it brings all sorts of visions to the mind. But it's been designed as a fantastic precinct, not from the point of view of a place for businesses to operate in a refugee sort of a manner, but a place that people really want to come to, not just wants to have a look at, but to keep coming back as a fantastic retail experience. So it's a neat development. You mentioned it was built in 7 to 8 months. Yeah, the original. We came involved just after the February earthquake, and the doors were open for trading on the 29th of October. Just, exactly. There was still a massive amount of work going on through the night on the 28th of October, and finishing touches being put in place up to the lunchtime opening on the 29th. And if the truth be known, there was still quite a few bits and pieces going on behind the scenes for the days following, but it certainly opened for business.
Anthony, on that point, I think there'd be businesses here and organisations thinking 8 months, if I could get something done in 8 months, I'd love to do that. Are there any examples from what you've done that others can pick up on? Or is it only applicable in a disaster management response situation, do you think?
Not at all. The environment that we're in created the level of commitment and buy-in to this particular project. But, and Mary touched on it, everybody who was involved in this was fully committed. The reason we were able to deliver it, I say we, the royal we being all of the stakeholders of the project, because everybody was aligned and everyone was entirely unified in the vision that they were going forward on. Just to quickly talk you through the project and how it was done, you need to look at it in 3 stages. The first stage was actually creating the vision, understanding what was trying to be created and getting the support for it. And that was challenging in itself because of the environment that we're in. However, once the vision was defined and we started talking to people about it, we started talking to civil defence, government, local authority and the like, it quickly became apparent that this was a fantastic project, and support came quite quickly. It did take some time to compile the necessary funds, but by and large the support was there. The second stage of the project was to clear what was a complete disaster zone. I'm sure a lot of you would have seen the photos. To create a clear site in which we could operate was probably actually the hardest part of the project, because coming back to that initial point that I made, it was the one time of the project where everybody wasn't completely aligned. There were so many conflicting interests. You had demolition contractors who weren't particularly part of the greater project, so that clearing the sites was very, very hard. And then the actual physical design, the design and the physical construction was one of the most fastest delivered projects we've ever done, but in saying that, it was one of the easiest because everybody was so committed, from whether it was a person who was pouring a piece of concrete on site or to the architect or to the greater stakeholders. Everybody on the project was absolutely committed to the 29th of October.
That was visible, obviously, from looking at it outside. Final quick question. If you're also involved in deconstruction and construction here in the city, Are you starting to see within the CBD some good green shoots of recovery? Peter Townsend touched on it, said we're just starting to see things moving. Is that your experience?
Yes, there is certainly some movement. Well, actually, I'll go back a step. There's no momentum in my mind from the point of view of physical rebuilding. We are starting to see a few green shoots popping out. There are new buildings being constructed in the centre of Christchurch. There are some very brave developers who are pushing projects ahead and showing a degree of leadership in doing so. But it is very early days. There is a city plan to be defined, there's insurance issues to resolve, and I'm not going to go there. But certainly taking a cup half full, yes, there is green shoots popping through, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll start to see a bit of momentum really kick in.
Thank you, Anthony Lee. Sam Johnson. Right, when the earthquake struck, you managed to mobilise hundreds and hundreds of students, thousands in fact in the final analysis. What was the secret of doing it?
Well, the whole time it was very much captivating the motivation that already existed out there. And as we all know, straight after the earthquakes, everyone has that desire to help quite instantly. But like any sort of situation, spontaneous volunteers, those of us who come out of nowhere and want to do good, can be more than annoying for many organisations, particularly the council and the EOC at the time. So the volunteer army was very much just captivating that motivation and doing whatever was required. And as we've coined it now, really the skill of being unskilled and just doing anything and whatever was needed at the time. Back in September, we were very focused on purely shoveling the liquefaction and being very productive and efficient with that. What we soon learned between September and February was the importance the role actually had in showing community support to so many people out there in the suburbs. Whether not just going around and efficiently clearing all the silt, but going door to door and actually spending 10 minutes with every different resident.
You gave a lot of hugs out too, didn't you?
We did give a lot of hugs, yeah, an awful lot of hugs, and I think that was also so much a part of it and so important, and why we tried to tell our team leaders that it's not just so important to go and shovel the silt, but actually to show the residents that there is that level of care out there in the streets.
Right. You've been a little critical publicly of the response of some of the emergency management folk. You've had meetings with the council. Are you confident now that things would improve here in Christchurch, and is there a template from that other centres might learn from?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that spontaneous volunteering is dealt with in New Zealand still needs a lot of work, and I think organisationally in New Zealand, we need to realise that there is that incredible motivation for people to help out and do anything that is required after particularly a seismic event. Within council, they've certainly shown that it's very much identified that it is a huge problem, though I think it's actually, there needs to be a bit of a cultural shift about the way that they deal with that and the way that we deal with it with them. So I think it's important to realise that that we certainly acknowledge that we don't want to become part of civil defence and the way it all operated and the spontaneous nature of the volunteer, and it needed to be separate from any authority to be able to have that flexibility to do whatever. But we also needed I guess the biggest problem we had was the flow of information, and there's no integrity with the information that was coming through. And while for a start we could pour up to 1,800 people a day out to the streets and simply shovel liquefaction from the different areas, when it got to the point where we didn't know where to send them next, we had no way to get information of who really needed the help. And the irony of our system, the system that that the students completely relied upon, and is used by many young people, Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, Google Maps, everything like that, cannot be used by the people who most need the help. And how do you best navigate that relationship to know that the council call centre, for instance, could take the calls from people who really needed the help, and that information could be siphoned through to not only us but any community group out there. And I think that's one of the largest area of work that needs to happen within civil defence, to look at the way that we develop that flow of information. And while we had a text service, an 0800 number, and emails and everything else, how do you make sure that people are actually get the right support, and if they find information out there in the field, how do they feed that back in?
Yes. A final question around, this was obviously a response to an enormous disaster. How do you keep students or anybody, any volunteer motivated? Because obviously there's flow-on effects from the quakes. Students are an enormously useful resource to be able to draw on. have you got plans and capacities to continue to do that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest problems we face in Christchurch right now is the flight of young people, because there is nothing here for them to do, and it's very, very difficult to convince people to stay, especially after they've spent a summer in Wellington or Auckland and come back and want to go out to a club, but they don't open late, and just try to set up a small business. A lot of some friends of mine who are trying to do that sort of thing at the moment get stonewalled very quickly and just don't have the level of patience that you get sort of knocked into you as you grow old. I think so.
Is that what it is?
I certainly am learning that very fast. The way that we were able to operate was going completely between the lines and actually just scuttling around the edges of any rule or any authority to try and make sure that we did what we did best, which was shovel silt and show support to the community, without having to get sort of stymied by any sort of bureaucracy, while ticking all the boxes at the same time. The way that it was so organic and the way that we were able to go from one thing to another very quickly, and the way our work now focuses on purely the social side of Christchurch. We have a program we're putting together called The Concert, which is happening on the 7th of October. It's essentially a large-scale concert in Hagley Park for 5,000 to 10,000 young people. But the only way to get a ticket to it is to do 5 hours of volunteering. So just try and change the way we look at concerts, the way we look at music, and the way that we look at the way young people are engaged in Christchurch. As I look forward, the biggest problem for those of us who are in this room as well, some of the younger ones around the city, we need to have the reason to stay here, and we need to have some sort of physical and emotional connection into the city. And also just something to do. And so it doesn't rely on us organising a whole lot of projects. It relies on every community group and business and everyone going out there and organising something, whatever it is, that we could pump a whole lot of students in, or a whole lot of young people or employees, anyone into it, and then to come and reward them with a great concert. I think the other big thing for Christchurch, and right now, which is pressing on my door a lot, is the lack of jobs out there for young people and the lack of reasons to stay in Christchurch. And we've got a huge amount of work to do to try and provide the reasons for different, and the means for different people to stay in Christchurch. And I think some of these little projects teach them that actually, while Council and Sarah are seen as the major leaders within the Christchurch rebuild, actually a lot of the work and a lot of what I find misunderstanding, a lot of what you can do happens at the grassroots level, and you don't need the tick of approval. You can just go and do it. And that's one thing we're trying to promote through this initiative, is that young people just go out there and do it. If you see a blank spot of land, just go and build a little pop-up park or a playground or a little library or something on there for a month or so, and very rarely will anyone have a problem with that. And it creates such a strong facility for that area and with that community, and it provides them something to do.
That's right.
Keep us off.
Well, I think you've done a great deal to change the perception of many, many people about students and the lives that they lead, and I commend you for that and all that you've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think community engagement is really the key to how we go forward from here on. So can I thank Sam, can I thank Mary, and can I thank Anthony for the work that they've done so far in the rebuild of Christchurch. Big challenges ahead. I hope that their perceptions are useful to you this morning. Back to you, Lyle.